Good design is sometimes about getting rid of everything that is unnecessary to offer only what's truly essential. Hello, listeners, and welcome to another season of MICAST, MICA's official podcast. And we've titled this season The New Norm. I'm Nitesh.
And I'm Piyush, and we are your host for this new season. Our guest for today is a perfectionist to the level of insanity. His creativity never goes out of style. Over the last 16 years, he has been a design consultant with retail, fashion, media, publishing, and hospitality industry with various brands like Shoppers Stop, Raymond's, Oxfam India, Amnesty International, etc. Currently, he is the chairperson of the CCC program at MICA. Welcome, Nitesh, sir. We're really excited to have you with us.
Well, thank you, Piyush. Thank you, Anatpreet. This is really exciting to be with you guys here and slightly overwhelming to get that introduction, but thank you nevertheless.
So, sir, before we begin with the other questions, I just want to ask this question and get it out of the way. So, what, according to you, is the new normal? And do you think that this new normal of yours is here to stay, or is it just a very short lived moment?
I think we human beings have a tendency to find nomenclatures, and especially who live in the tagging generation. And I would like to refrain from calling this the new normal. First of all, we need to question what normal meant to us before we termed this period of our lives as new normal. So I guess this is a passage of time. Time is a churn, and it keeps churning and it keeps throwing us in different directions. And as human beings, we have to just adapt ourselves with certain abilities and ways and means of aligning ourselves with the times. And so I don't know if I'm excited or I'm thrilled in calling this the new normal. I'm just going to accept this as a test of time. You remember when we take those flights and there's certain turbulences and we all lose faith, and then the flight aligns itself midair. I guess we're going through a turbulence, and the turbulence is trying to tell us something. We just need to pay attention and listen what it's trying to tell us. That's all.
So that was a great analogy of comparing it with a turbulence, and we have to accept whatever way it is. So
Yes.
in the past 3 months, we have been consuming content like never before, because that was our only escape.
Yeah.
It has made us grin, laugh, and many a times ponder. Can you guide us as to how a marketer can keep the content relevant and cut the clutter both at the same time? And that too, when all the brands are only talking about the pandemic and how we are all in this together.
I have noticed something in the last couple of months which has specifically caught my attention. I'd like to talk about it, and especially from a point of view of a graphic designer or a visual communication artist. Um, you know, logos are supposed to be sacrosanct for brands, and because they are primarily tools to communicate more than what they truly stand for. And of everything that I've seen in the last couple of months, one of the most striking examples has been how various brands such as McDonald's, Audi, Volkswagen, and Coca Cola have chosen to break free from the stringent branding guidelines to communicate their messages around social distancing. Now, not just this, if you look at a brand like Pizza Hut, it went ahead and tweaked its own original identity and changed the nomenclature to Pizza Home within all their social media handle. Now, this tells us something about how brands are not fixated about who they wanted to be seen as or who they wanted to be defined as, but they have also accepted the reality which has prompted them to be more flexible and adapt to certain ways through which they can get closer to their audiences and customers, which also means tweaking and distorting their branding, which is phenomenal for me because we are very we are control freaks as designers, and once a logo has been created, no one wants to touch it. Forget about moving it, distorting it, or whatever. Even closer home, I think Leo Burnett came up with this very cool campaign of using the outer grid of the HDFC Bank logo to create physical markers on the grounds to help people maintain the social distance while they were waiting in queues outside shops and other establishments. Now, can you imagine HDFC allowing the frames within which the branding has always stayed to move out without HDFC in it and let people stand inside it? Now, I think these are great steps for companies, organization, and brands to allow how their branding and their identity can become more than just communicators. They can become part of people's lives, and I think that's what is very exciting for me. It has helped me understand how communication and creative communication, especially in these times, can help brands come closer to their customers.
True, that's very true what you've just said. And also, when you were talking about Leah Burnett, it just struck me that I was reading in this article just a few days back that Leo Burnett, London's chief creative officer, Chaka Sobhani, I think that's her name, she recently said in an interview that we ourselves don't have a clue what to do. She mentioned that we are here only resorting to the creative intuition, and that's what is saving them from this mental block. So, when you were also talking about this, I just want to know that how important is this creative intuition in such a time?
To be very honest, Nitpreet, when I was studying in NID in the late 90s, I discovered this word called intuition. And at that point of time, it sounded pretty cool. And it was like this fancy term that designers loved using. But as I chanced upon the work of some of the iconic graphic designers of that time, like Neville Brody and David Carson, I realized that they could be creating a kind of work which they did because they were not following prescribed norms, but they were listening to an intuition inside which kind of gave their work a very new approach, and it allowed them to break free from the shackles of traditional grids and layouts. Thus, what they were doing by being intuiting is they were giving birth to a new design language, a new school of thought, and what could be termed as radical at counterculture at that point of time has now become the idiom for designers who are contrarian in nature. So I feel if you are creative, in being intuitive has to be intrinsic to your understanding of creativity, without which you are following a very straight line, you're following preconceived notions, old school of thoughts. So I think you don't have a chance today if you're not intuitive, because only by being intuitive you can truly be honest and fearlessly expressive.
I will keep that point in mind for sure. And I anyways think that even in MICA, we were taught a lot to be intuitive in terms of how we approach towards any problem. So,
Yeah.
do you think in the recent time, in the recent months, the last 3 months basically, do you think that creativity has found a different meaning altogether?
Absolutely. Like I'll give you an example closer home, and I think a whole lot of people will be able to relate with it. I love cooking, and I was trying to bake a cake in these lockdown days. And if in earlier times baking a cake was a sign of being creative, today being able to bake a cake in the absence of baking soda is perhaps what defines creativity. I've always
Yeah.
challenged myself and my students to create more with less, or do with something that's not there at your disposal. So now we all might have to learn how to create with limited access to things. It has compelled all of us to be more ingenious, more intuitive, more imaginative. By the way, you can replace baking soda or baking powder with yogurt, vinegar, lemon juice, and still be able to bake a good cake. So I guess we just have to accept these very natural ways of approaching life. I don't think creativity comes with a different book that needs to be followed. I think these are ways to adapt to our surroundings creatively. That's all.
Exactly, sir. Completely, we agree to whatever you mentioned. So, since you mentioned about design and creativity, and we also know that all our classes are now going to be held digitally for the
Yes.
foreseeable future of time.
Yeah.
So, can you give us an insight as to how your class is going to look, or the changes that you're planning for the upcoming time and to your pedagogy?
Piyush, I've always believed that the world is a classroom and learning cannot be limited to four walls. And this is something that I'm not saying now post COVID. This has always been my approach And when I stand in front of the classroom and I talk to my students, I said so much of learning happens outside of the classroom, in the museums, in within corporate setups. When you're walking and strolling through the malls, you're looking at the window display, you're talking to managers on floor, you're talking to chefs in restaurants. You understand the larger ecosystem of the world through which we are navigating, and functioning as creative communicators or managers. Now this idea gets furthermore reinstated because a whole generation of learners will be engaging with the idea of virtual classroom. Now they will not get to step out into the world, but they'll have to quickly adapt to learning new ways of imbibing education within the confines of their homes. Now, being digital natives, you guys already have an upper edge. You will be far more competent in adapting these new ways of navigating through the unpredictable times. And we will just have to offer you a canvas to imbibe new imagination, a canvas that allows you to be more fearless in your approaches and insights and ideas when you're turning them into projects or campaigns, while making you all realize that you guys are the custodians of the future. And as stakeholders of this model called people, planet, profit, you all will have to inculcate a value system through education. And we offer that as faculty from MICA and all the other institutes. We are gearing up not so much about how we will adapt to the digital class, but how we can enforce more realistic, authentic, and compelling value systems that will empower you all to be more responsible creators and managers of the future.
Yes, sir, definitely. And since you mentioned about going out, and we have been confined to the four walls of our homes for the past 3 months,
Yeah,
and it felt peeping out from the windows felt like being caged. But as we were discussing before as well, you mentioned that it meant light, music, and more air for you.
yeah.
So, how did you draw these parallels, and like where did you bring this positivity from?
The more I try and understand this construct, I keep going back to Anne Frank, and she's always made me wonder from where did she gather the courage, the strength, and the resilience to cope and endure all the adversities that she was engulfed in. Now, perhaps she could have easily allowed herself to be eaten up by the darkness, and instead she kindled into a glowing light, and such a sharp and bright and burning light which still continues to give us hope. And even today, in these times of uncertainty and darkness and gloom, I can't help but go back to Anne Frank. And I've always believed we are not defined by our experiences. Instead, we are defined by what we do with those experiences. So we might easily get succumbed to hopelessness in these desperate moments. But I think it is very innate to human nature to be able to rise from the ashes. And I think we must not put this as a way of making ourselves look more productive or more aware of our surroundings, but just give ourselves that faith that I am bigger than what I'm being challenged by. And I think rest we'll be able to navigate through any darkness.
Interesting. So we all know that there have been a lot of challenges in the I think in fact the year 2020 itself should be termed challenges. So
Hmm.
with so many layoffs, uncertain employment scenarios, economic recession, any and every negative news that we could hear in 2020,
Yeah.
how important is it to focus on personal branding as well? Because as marketeers, we know how to work for a company and its branding, but how much importance and focus should we pay on ourselves as well and improve our personal branding and call ourselves a successful brand?
Yeah, Nitpreet, no matter how dire the situation we are faced with, our core values are intrinsic, and I don't think they wither with the onslaught of time. The world demands now all the more to be more reflective, more aware, more sensitive, more empathetic, more considerate, and more inclusive. But like you say, all individuals have a lot of pressure to share a knee-jerk opinion on social media. Now, anything happens out there, there is a strange kind of inertia that urges us to comment and post, and because we are also opinionated, and even brands have similar pressures. So one thing that I might want all of us to do is pause and reflect and ask yourself, what defines me, what constitutes to my nature, and has this changed post covid, has covid changed to me, has it challenged me to become a new person, a different person, a person who thinks differently, is more receptive to the surroundings, to the world, to the environment, that I the space that I occupy. And if I am aware of the world, can I ask what is the role that I'll be playing in this world, and how will I exercise that awareness? And once you become slightly introspective in nature and have these conversations with yourselves, you realize that even brands are being compelled to do that, because they had certain attributes, they had certain vision and philosophy. What covid has done is, it has, at an individual level, at a personal level, at a corporate level, at an institutional level, it has all challenged us to rethink, redesign, realign ourselves, and how we will be seen to the world. So I think it's very essential that you have these conversations with yourself. And irrespective of if you want to kind of present yourself as a brand or not, it is essential to human existence. Who am I, and how I'm going to navigate through these times? And I think that will eventually shape a whole lot of things that you will propagate as a brand or an individual. So that's what I think.
So it's always, I can't even tell you how good it feels to listen to you, you know? It's like always like
Yeah, exactly.
such positive vibes, and it's
Thank
always inspirational.
Thank you so much, guys. I mean, I feel that we will all pass through this way, and we will always do what we have to do. But what will define our passage is the imprints that we leave behind. So we must be very conscious of what we say, what we communicate, what we put out there in the world. I keep going back to this beautiful friend of mine called Ankit Chadda, who was a storyteller. He was a Dastan Goi, and he passed away a couple of years ago. And he had a very beautiful thing to say. He said that words are energy forms. So everything that we say out from our mouth, from our heart, is perhaps adding to the energy that is outside of us. So it could be negative or positive. So we have to be extremely mindful for what we are passing on in form of information, thoughts, ideas, whatever that is.
Yes, absolutely. And I know that every student in MICA, be it a CCC student or a PGDM student, we all have special place in our hearts for you. And so, for being so well connected to MICA and all of us expecting such good things from you, we now are going to move to a much more fun segment.
Sure.
And in this, we are going to ask you some questions, and you have to answer as rapidly as you could. And since you're all about creativity and we love your creative perspective, so we want you to be as creative and witty as you can be with the answers.
Sure, Nitpreet. I'll try my best.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so sir, the first question to you is three must-have skills which are required in this new normal.
Ingenious, innovative, adaptable.
Your favorite sports that you discovered in your house during the lockdown period.
Favorite sports?
Spot. The favorite spot in your house.
The window near the kitchen sink. It's beautiful. The light filters in, and it's a beautiful space to create portraits.
The most creative thing or a new habit that you developed during the lockdown period.
I'm a better chef now. I can make
Okay,
parathas. I thought cooking was all about bruschetta and pizza and ravioli and risotto, but now I can make parathas, soul food. I'm loving it.
so since you are a chef now, what's your favorite dish at Chota?
Well, I'm not a big fan of chota. You guys will kill me for it.
Oh my god, sir.
Oh,
This is actually going to be like
oh
the
my.
clickbait for this podcast. I have a very strong sense it's going to be that.
See, I have been telling Vandana that you have to make chota more healthy. But I love indulging in the Anish paratha. I can't. That's my junk, my indulgence, my craving. I give it to Anish paratha.
Okay.
Okay. So, the most creative cultural practice that has emerged in the lockdown period.
I think our ability to share intimate stories without holding in any layers or any guards, because we've realized that we don't have any other stories to but to tell our own stories out there. So I think if earlier people were slightly inhibited, and now they have gone out and told their stories of fear, their stories of desire, their stories of anger and helplessness in a very joyous way, and I think that's very exciting to see.
Great. Three ways that you would recommend us to become more creative.
Well, be honest, because creativity doesn't stem out of pretense. Be honest. Uh, be explorative. Creativity cannot happen with a straight line. You should know to dance under the line, above the line, around the line. Be explorative and be fearless, because I don't think you can draw within the box, breaking the box. Don't have the box, draw a circle and see if you can jump out of it, or draw a quadrangle. So I think creativity demands you to be reinventing your idea of the self, and you have to be completely be free of anything that's binding you from doing so.
Okay. And the most creative brand that you can think of during this pandemic?
I have, this can be a slightly long reply. I've been very critical of brands and how they are projecting themselves during the pandemic. But I love the campaign that Guardian has come up with, a butterfly stuck inside a glass room,
Hmm.
and how it breaks free
Yeah.
by breaking the glass. And I think Guardian being at the forefront of very powerful communication, and being true to what they do in real life, how they've given the power of communication and news to the people. And I think that campaign really was one of my favorite. So I would give it to Guardian. Yeah.
Okay. The most creative mic and spot in your opinion.
So you guys have heard of the hammock behind the president's bungalow? What used to be the
Yes,
president's
sir.
bungalow is now
Yes,
the guest
yes,
house.
we've been there on numerous visits.
Yeah,
A
I
very
think that.
picturesque spot.
Yes, I think that is like a hidden spot. That's like the secret
Yeah.
spot. I don't know the stories around it. For me, it fills me with a sense of solace and solitude and calmness. So I love that little spot. But otherwise, the walk from the main gate to Chota also fills me with a lot of joy. Just by looking at the whole pathway that leads to knowledge, that leads to transformation, that leads to self-discovery, in a very metaphorical way, but also in a very reassuring way.
Okay. The most creative event that is organized in MICA.
I think I will give it to the TEDx, because it brings a whole lot of voices that not just are very relevant to our times, but are also voices that become very defining with time. For example, Abhishek, who has stolen the show in Pagal, he was in TEDx Micah, I think the year before, and at that point of time, we didn't know what he will bloom into, what he will become. But I think the curators at MICA spotted him early on and brought him into the forum, gave him the podium. And what he spoke about nepotism in that TEDx, I think still holds true to our times in a very eerie and ironical way. And I think that ability that students have as curators to identify not just relevant and prominent speakers, but people who will become very prominent in time to come. I think I will give it to TEDx Micah.
Okay, sir. So, a must read book for creative people?
The Art of Looking Sideways by Alan Fletcher. It is like a Bible. You can't read it from the first page to the last page, but Alan Fletcher is one of the most iconic graphic designers in his times, and today also is looked up by a lot of design students for his very eclectic way of looking at design approaches and creative solutions. And he has helped me become who I am. He's shaped my consciousness, and I think it's a must read. It's a must read book for any person who's creative, and I think we all are creative. So please, Alan Fletcher, Art of Looking Sideways.
Sure, sir. And three movies that showcase creativity at its best.
Wow, why do you guys have to do this to me? Out of the million movies that I might have seen, you asked me to choose three movies. But let me see.
Yes.
Yeah, let me try and get this right for you. Okay, so the three films where I feel creativity has been played upon in a very interesting way. The first one will be Across the Universe by Julie Taymor, where she takes 20 odd songs by the Beatles and she reconstructs the songs by splicing it within the narrative. I think it's a beautiful film to watch, to see visually, and to engage with because it spans through the American timeline around the Vietnam War. The second film, which is very close to my heart, which is creative in a sense of how a subject is handled, is Seven by David Fincher, where we've seen a lot of films about serial killers, about cops and detectives, but how David Fincher sets up the whole story, the plot, the narrative, and creates this very visually engaging drama. I feel that he's thinking constantly out of the box and bending the genre of serial killer films. For me, that is my second favorite film. And the third film is Closer Home, which is Anurag Kashyap's Black Friday, where because he has so little to work with, he reinvents himself in ways to bring this journalistic piece, which was made into a book, into real life celluloid. And I loved the way he was so fearless in taking the ideas and approaches by working with non-famous actors in real life locations with very limited technical know-how, bringing on Indian Ocean to give the music. I think every decision he made showed how ingenious and creative he was. So I think these three would be my top of the mind recall creative films.
Okay, sir. And finally, an end note on creativity for our listeners.
Well, I think I've said it all. There is a whole notion that creativity is something that has to be learned in a school or through books, but I think creativity is a way of life. Our moms have been the most creative people because every day they wake up and figure out ways of managing a kitchen and serving food to five, six family members. And I think from the idea of going and picking the vegetable to deciding what needs to be cooked, how it needs to be cooked, how it needs to be served, if it has to be healthy, I think it's problem solving at its core. And it's a consistent practice day after day. So I think we need to change our lens and re-understand and realign ourselves with what creativity means. And hopefully we will then start recognizing people and practices that seem very banal but are truly intrinsically creative in nature. So that's my last thought.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking out time for getting on this podcast with us. And we can't thank you enough for being such a wonderful speaker. Very, very inspirational.
Thank
And
you.
we truly are going to follow each and everything that you've recommended or advised us. And we really hope that we get to see you in person very soon at MICA, outside MICA.
Absolutely.
I don't care. I just want to
Sure,
see
sure,
you, have a chat
definitely.
with you at Chota again really soon.
Yes. Yes, Nitpreet. Looking forward to seeing
So
you
yeah,
all in real. Thank you, Piyush. Thank you so much, both of you. Lots of love. Take
definitely, sir.
care.
Thanks a
Yeah.
lot for the
Yeah.
Thank you
valuable
so
stuff
much,
that you
sir.
talked.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
Bye. See
thank
you.
you. So, guys, that was it from our side. You can follow MICAST, the MICAN podcast on Instagram, and you can stream us on JioSaavn, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Google Podcasts as well. Keep sharing, and yes, stay safe. Thank you.